Everything old is new again. America's entertainment pop culture talk show.
It may well possess a rudimentary intelligence.
I'm trying to think, but nothing happens.
Felt a great disturbance in the force.
Hello, I'm Mr. Red.
Come on, Mark, like a job for me.
Where's the goodies? Leave the gun. Take the cannoli.
I bet you wouldn't have done anything like this if Mom and Dad were here.
You filthy criminal.
Excuse me while I whip this out.
Go ahead. Make my day.
Here are your hosts, Douglas Viviani and David Cohen.
Not today, no. This is Douglas Viviani here. Welcome to Everything Old is New Again with our very own court jester himself, David Cohen.
Yes, yes.
Pay attention, you're on the air.
For today's show, Doug. Very excited.
I'll tell you,
thanks for having me.
It's going to be terrific. We have a week here that is going to be amazing. We're joined by Grammy Award and honoree, songwriter, Hall of Fame member, BBC Lifetime Achievement Award recipient, and you just heard a little piece of American Pie, which is and was named top 5 song, or one of the top 5 songs of the 20th century. He's got so many more hits. His new album, Still Playing in Favorites. I'm sorry, Still Playing Favorites, was released this past November. American Pie will be featured. It's still 50 years later, 50th anniversary this year, but it will be featured in the upcoming Black Widow movie and Tom Hanks movie bios. Welcome to Everything Old is New Again, Don McLean.
Thank you. Nice to be here. I like the format of your show. I like all that stuff. I like looking back. It's fun.
And I'll tell you what, you do it well also within your songs. You do have a lot of pop culture references. You of course author songs entirely about pop culture icons such as Vincent and more. There's Fred Astaire and so you do reflect that, I think, in your music. Am I wrong?
You are not wrong. No, that's correct. I don't think I've really found anything or any artist really that I get excited about after 1970. Everything for me is like from there backwards. There are a lot of wonderful acts and fine people and everything, but I would see everybody when I was young in those 10 years from 60 to 70 when I had a little money. And I saw everybody. So I would see Sinatra, and I would see Josh White, and I worked with Pete Seeger, and I would see Count Basie and Sarah Vaughan, and all the great singers, and that's what I'm into. So was able to do that. I also love guitar, and flamenco guitar. So I saw Montoya and Sabicas, and in the summers when I was young, I would play a place in Lenox, Massachusetts called Music Inn, and they had a club on the property. It was a fantastic place, and it was a little nightclub, and Brownie McGee and Sonny Terry would be the headliners, and I'd be the opener, and I was still in college, and we would live together in this Quonset hut they had there for overflow guests. It was just like an army thing with cots, and I would play the blues all summer with Brownie McGee, so I was right up against everything that I loved all the time, one way or the other, and sometimes there'd be flamenco guitarists like Georges Morel, or I can't think of the others, and I'd watch them practice, I'd be sitting there in this little living room and watch, and then it's fantastic, just being that close to that kind of artistry and history and everything, and the tone of the instrument.
Well, and that's sort of the theme of our show, too, is we take a look at the past and we shine a light on the past, if you will, or a flashlight or a spotlight, if you will, and we take a look at where we are today and how what we have today, and no matter what genre it is based upon the foundation of the past. So I think you're just describing for us how you were ahead of your time in terms of with respect to everything old is new again, in that in the 60s and 70s, especially in the 60s in your formative times, you were looking to Sinatra and all the people that you just mentioned working with, building your future based upon the foundation of what they produced. Does that make sense?
I was trying to be a good singer, and therefore I liked not only the pop singers, all of them, I mean, Brooke Benton and people like that, but I also loved Roy Orbison and Elvis Presley and Marty Robbins, to name a few of people that really could sing. They took chances. They sang high notes. Marty was a great singer, and Elvis was a phenomenal singer. And Roy Orbison, it was all about the voice, and just the same as if it would be with Sinatra or any of those pop singers. It was about the voice, and not about the clothes, and not about the how loud they were. Buddy Holly was a particular favorite of mine because of the songwriting and the nature of the Crickets, which was basically a blueprint for every rock and roll band that came afterwards: 2 guitars, bass, and drums. And then he wrote his own songs, so he was always. Yeah, in fact, I was thinking as I was thinking your opening there, Buddy Holly went to see with the Crickets in 1956, I guess it was, or around there, the Searchers with John Wayne. Went to the movie theater, and those days the movie theater was air conditioned, which was probably the only place you could go to get away from the heat. No place else was, but air conditioned movies were a big thing in the 50s. And so they went and saw the Searchers, and in the Searchers, John Wayne, one of his catchphrases is "That'll be the day." The young guy, one of the young people that he's with there says, if you do this, I'll fight you. He says, "That'll be the day." And he does it several more times in the movie. So Buddy came out and wrote "That'll be the day." So there's a connection between the song and the movie.
And certainly all of pop culture does affect us, that's for sure, and it bleeds into all of our art. David, you have a question specifically before I jump into
I just wanted to mention, Don, your voice isn't too bad either. Just wanted to throw that out there.
Well, I worked at it, I enlarged it. I took singing lessons. I stopped smoking, although Sinatra smoked like a chimney. I mean, the guy was amazing, and he still sang. But he didn't last that long as a singer, really. And the time Frank Sinatra was 60, his voice was pretty shot, and I'm a lot older than that, and I can still hit all the high notes. And so it's important not to smoke for a whole lot of reasons. That's one very big improvement from the 1960s, is the reduction in people smoking and giving themselves illnesses. But because I wanted to be a better singer, it led to better health.
Interesting. Well, yeah, and for instance, you did a great cover of the Roy Orbison song, "Crying," and I don't think many singers do this well, and you're one of them. But that great falsetto voice that you employ, at least on that song, like the Beach Boys did, and Roy, and so many others.
I love the Beach Boys, and the best record I made was from those sessions also, and that was "Since I Don't Have You," where I hit the highest note I've ever hit on a record. And the fun thing, I have this new YouTube channel, which is sponsored by Time Life and Warner Brothers Records, they have put out Still Playing Favorites, and will put out another album of mine that I'm going to do this year called American Boys. But the neat thing is that I can take the master of Crying, and I can remix it without the strings, so that the fans can hear the live performance of that song with me, the band, and the Jordanaires in the studio, because it was a live performance. There were no edits in that record. That was just us doing it one time through. And, then the strings were layered on later.
That's interesting, yeah.
So you'll be able to hear a different thing if you like that track. And the same with Since I Don't Have You. You'll be able to hear what happened. Almost like the breathing in the studio. It's live,
That's amazing stuff. We're going to be back right after this, and Everything Old is New Again. Sorry to cut you off with Don McLean. We're back right after this, and Everything Old is New Again.
Oh, and there we were all in one place, a generation lost in space, with no time left to start again.
Well, this is Karen Allen from Raiders of the Lost Ark and Zarman, and I'm here to tell you about my wonderful store and website, KarenAllenFiberArts.com. It's KarenAllen-FiberArts.com. I carry all kinds of really unique gifts and women's clothing lines from all over the world, from small studios that are things you won't see anywhere else. And if you're looking for a gift or something for yourself, please get in touch with us. We would love to help you find that special thing.
That's KarenAllen-FiberArts.com.
You're listening to Everything Old is New Again, America's entertainment pop culture talk show with Douglas Viviani and David Cohen.
Jim, try to be open about this. About what? I've made the wrong choices in my life. If I turned left when I should have turned right. I know what my weaknesses are. I don't need Cyborg to take me on a tour of them. Damn it, Bones, you're a doctor. You know that pain and guilt can't be taken away with the wave of a magic wand. They're the things we carry with us, the things that make us who we are. If we lose them, we lose ourselves. I don't want my pain taken away. I need my pain.
Welcome back to Everything Old is New Again. There's a favorite of the show and our Star Trek reference here with David Cohen, Douglas Viviani, with Don McLean. We're just having some fun talking all things music and references to the past, and certainly in American Pie, you referenced A Generation Lost in Space, which I'm interpreting myself as referring to that television show from the 60s, and of course we've got a Star Trek reference there with Kirk in Star Trek 5, the movie, talking about pain, and I bring that up because I'm just wondering, as a creative person, whether you're a comedian or writing a novel or an artist, do you believe that you need to have a reservoir of pain that you've gone through in some level, as Kirk is saying there, to be a good artist and to be able to reflect all of the emotions that you're trying to reflect in your music?
Yes, is the answer to that. If most people who are artists, if they've had a perfect life, they're going to be very boring, and they're not going to be able to really understand or even enunciate certain things. What you're trying to do as a songwriter is express the inexpressible. I wrote a song called When July Comes, which is on the Botanical Gardens album. And I'm very pleased with that recording of that song and that album, actually. But there's an inexpressible longing, I think, for summer and youth and love, and intermingled with the hard reality of time passing and things changing forever. And one of the beautiful things about recordings is that they never change. They'll knock buildings down and pull statues over, and presidents will come and go, but a day in the life will always be the same. American Pie will always be the same. Vincent will always be the same. Good Vibrations will always be the same. And it's important, for people to have something that they can go back to, and it gives them a sense of place, a sense of time, a sense of stark reality, rather than everything today is becoming very, I think there's so much information and so little time to concentrate that the entire country is not as mentally strong as it was in the 1950s or 60s even. I think they're very fragile emotionally. They're fragile. They have allowed the phone and the computer to answer their questions rather than memorizing things and remembering things. All simple stuff like times tables we had to know, and parts of speech and all the rest of that stuff. Wouldn't be surprised if there are a lot of young kids in college right now who couldn't do a times table, multiplication. So, using your mind is very important. I mean, I know 10,000 songs, and I can learn them in a second, and I know hundreds and hundreds I've written hundreds of songs, and I remember them all. I mean, I have a prodigious memory, there's no doubt about that, but I use it.
Right. Well, the brain is like a muscle too. I mean, you need to continue to use it, otherwise it'll atrophy. And I agree with you on much, if not all, of what you say. In that, 'cause I have kids that are 8 and 11, and we're trying to combat the telephone and the nihilism of just everybody looking at themselves on the phone and taking pictures, and that's all life is about. There's so much more than just talking to your buddies on the phone, like where are you and what are you doing? And I think it's what you're reflecting, and I agree with you 100%. And I just then ask you, what do you feel? I think we can sense it, but what do you feel of the music scene today? Is there anyone that you feel has some sense of sensibility of what we're talking about and reflecting something of meaning in their music?
Well, I mean,
it's hard to say, right?
Bob Dylan just put out a nice album. I haven't heard it all, but there are a couple of interesting songs that I saw the lyrics to. So he's still writing these things. I'm sure Bruce Springsteen tries to write these things. I think, Bruce, unfortunately, to me, is like a fifth carbon of Bob Dylan. He's not, I hate to say that. People are going to hate me for saying it, but I think his strength is in being a very powerful performer. And I think that's about it. I can't think of anybody else who's really delving into anything much. We have basically a Liberace rock and roll, where Liberace to me is the king of rock and roll, because Elvis just was a sort of a sad version of Liberace, but even though people are impressed with the outfits and the things that Elvis wore, Liberace put on an amazing show with 100 people in the show, and he had certain themes that he would do. It was always different. He's very creative, and he's just a guy who was a classical piano player who exploded this thing. And his outfits, as you know, were unbelievable, and the cars and stuff he'd bring them on stage and everything. That's Elton John. That's rock and roll. That's what it is. The song is secondary,
right?
And it really is.
David?
Yeah, I think I agree with that to a certain extent, but I'm actually more impressed, Don, and I wanted to ask you, how do you keep the creativity going after so many years? You came out with an album a couple of years ago, Botanical Gardens, and the song you mentioned from there, When July Comes, I think is, one of the best. And we're looking back over many, many, many years. How do you keep the creative juices going, and how are you still, time after time, being able to put out such, great original music?
But I don't take myself at all seriously as a songwriter. And if I don't have anything, people ask me, well, how do you write songs? And I say something that is very simple. If you don't have anything if you have something to say, you can write a song, perhaps. But you can't just sit down and you'll be blank. Your mind will go, you won't know where to head. Just sit there, what am I going to say? What am I going to write about? But if you have something inside of you that you need to get out, that's the time when you might be able to do that in song form, or a script, or a poem, or something. You have to have something in you to get out. And the problem is that young people are inundated, again, with fragmentation, titillation. They can't concentrate, and they put some fairly horrible garbage in their heads that's coming over the radio. It's pornographic, it's hateful, it's racist. It's a million bad things. And it's in their heads. It's no good. It's like eating bad food or taking drugs or something. And they probably do all that too. So it's all a downward slide. And the only way to extricate yourself from it, unfortunately, is you have to be very strong and resist that, and find beautiful things that you love, whether it's art or music or whatever, and put that in your mind, and then ideas will come out. Read the papers. I mean, I read the papers all the time. I know what's going on to the best of my ability, or to the best that the newspapers will tell me. I know it's not really what's going on, and I know there's a lot of things going on they don't tell you, which is what you really should know. That's the real news. We don't ever hear it. But, inform yourself about things.
But also, I think keeping an open mind to the past and to the entertainment and music and movies and so forth of the past, which we try to do with our kids too, is important, because what you're saying in your music is timeless, as we're talking about, and does bring out emotions, does bring out a thought process to think through, what is this song about? What is this story that this storyteller is telling me? Let me not just sit back and listen to things, but sort of let me get involved in it, where let me hear what this person is saying, because they have something to say. And I hate to cut you off, but I have about 30 seconds to follow up on that, if you want to follow up on that, Don.
Well, Woody Guthrie was the guy that, and Carl Sandburg before him, collected folk songs that had stories. This was the 1920s. And Woody Guthrie came along in the late 1930s, went in the Army in 1941, and he was hired by Roosevelt in the 30s to write songs about America, as were many other fine artists. And he wrote these stories about people, the plane wreck at Los Gatos, and stories about migrant workers and people that nobody cared about, and Dylan took that path. And that impressed me, and to a certain degree, I took that path. And it influenced a lot of other singers, songwriters who were around. But it's a hard thing to do and to keep at. And basically, you'll sacrifice friends, you'll sacrifice a lot of things as you grow. And suddenly, you find yourself in a class by yourself. And it's very lonely in a class by yourself. But if you get good enough, that's where you'll end up.
Right. We know what it's like to be lonely at the top, right, David? We'll be back right into this on Everything Old is New Again with Don McLean.
And if she asks you why, you can tell her that I told you that I'm tired of castles in the air.
Now, back to America's entertainment pop culture talk show. Everything Old is New Again, with Douglas Viviani and David Cohen.
And I love you so. The people ask me how I've lived till now. I tell them I don't know. I guess they understand how lonely life has been. But life began again the day you took my hand.
We're back here, and Everything Old is New Again with David Cohen, Douglas Viviani. Our special guest is Don McLean, the author of And I Love You So. We heard a little version there from Elvis, Perry Como. That song's been covered by so many, Helen Reddy, Shirley Bassey, Glenn Campbell, Engelbert Humperdinck. We can go on and on and on. And what a terrific song. Yes.
Elvis, I just got, because now they're recounting things. I'm getting all kinds of gold and platinum records for albums I made that they stopped counting on the 70s, and now they since the last 15 years. So my room is full of shining objects. But I just got a triple platinum Elvis Presley Award, RCA, for Elvis in Concert, where "And I Love You So" is basically the last song Elvis ever sang while he was alive on record. Those hits that I had with "Crying Since I Don't Have You," "Castles in the Air," those were made in 1980, around there and before, all with Elvis's backing band and the Jordanaires. Isn't that funny?
How about that? I didn't know that.
Isn't that wild? And my grandmother and I, when I was growing up, I was 10 or whatever, 1956, 10 or 11, and she was the only one that really was musical, and we would sit together and listen to Elvis sing, and she would just swoon. I mean, she loved the background singers and the Jordanaires, and I got to know them very, very well and work with them. And I took them all around the world. I took them to England. We did a TV special. We did Carnegie Hall 3 times, and it was Elvis is part of my life. And then to have him, do the song and do it basically every night on those last horrible 2 years of his life. I mean, there's the perfect example of somebody who didn't want to be Elvis Presley anymore, and he couldn't get out of it. You can see that he just didn't have any place to go but to anesthetize himself. It's a very sad story, and it's a Shakespearean almost, and the fact that he came from poverty in the South and brought his parents with him. He knew that the North would think that they were a bunch of hicks. He didn't care. This is my mom and dad. I'm doing this. I know he sang those songs for his mother. And when his mother died and he went in the army, basically that was the end of Elvis Presley. He came out and with sheer guts and determination, continued to perform and do one thing after another, culminating in that worldwide broadcast that the Colonel set up for him. And then pretty much after that, the downward slide started.
I will say this. He was offered Star is Born back in the 70s, and he wanted to do it, and the Colonel wouldn't let him do it. And to me, he wanted to turn and pivot, is what you're saying, is get out of that genre he was in, and wasn't allowed to do it from the forces within, from his own, let's say, what would you say, his commercial establishment there.
He had Lieber and Stoller, who wrote all sorts of great hits for Elvis, Don't being one of my favorites, talked to Elvis directly, and they were ostracized from that point on. The Colonel, and managers do this, they want to make sure that their golden goose is under glass and nobody touches him. They're the only one who communicates with this individual, and therefore they manage the information that they get and make sure that they always look good and everybody else looks bad, and they're always it's disgusting. I've lived through this. I know what it's like.
Sure, and it's tough to take chances that way too, because Elvis was in some ways too respectful of this gentleman, in my opinion, and wasn't able to then do what he wanted to do because it would stop. It was risky, let's say, and maybe would stop the dollars from coming in.
The thing, that's right. And the thing about it is that if you go to Lubbock, Texas, where Buddy Holly came from, you're going to see a lot of cotton fields, and Buddy would basically be putting flooring down, linoleum, with his father's company, or he'd be out picking cotton or driving a truck. And Elvis knew that if he screwed up this situation he had, he'd be back because, he felt, doing, what he would most likely have done otherwise, which has been some menial job somewhere. And nobody taught these guys how to watch out for their money. I mean, you can't imagine Elvis Presley really making good movies because he wouldn't be the king of rock and roll. It kind of had to work out like it did. It's weird because there's a certain kitschy quality to some of the things that Elvis did, but he elevated them into high art. I mean, All Shook Up could be a real piece of crap, if it weren't done by an artist of his greatness. It's him, and his effect on people. And he is the 1950s, really, in terms of young people. Elvis is it. Sinatra came back in the 50s and, and was, ring-a-ding-dinging his way along, and he had a whole new style and everything, brilliant talent and everything. But Elvis was our guy, and all the people that came after him came on the road, the trail that he blazed. They didn't come down the trail where you went to publishers and sang with big orchestras and stuff, even though big orchestras gave us the early rock and roll. Everybody, Bill Haley and everybody had these big rock and roll, King Curtis and his orchestra, and folk music was given to us too by the orchestra with Gordon Jenkins and the Weavers. Woody Guthrie and Hughie Ledbetter on the charts in 1952. This opened the door to people starting to play guitars themselves and make music themselves, rather than looking at entertainment as some sort of thing where you had to be schooled, and you just couldn't do it yourself,
Right, you had to be part of a formula.
You pick up a guitar and you play Don't Be Cruel or Love Me Tender, and that was the beginning of everything, right there.
Right. Great history. David.
Yeah, Tom, so back when all that was happening, there was rock and roll and there was folk music was starting to become popular. What led you down the path more towards the folk side of music? What's precipitated your interest there?
Well, the same thing happened to Dylan. It happened to a lot of people that then later moved over. We all had all of it inside of us. I have three kinds of music that I understand. Popular music from the 30s, 40s, 50s, songs written by Irving Berlin, that show tunes, whatever. I know this stuff. And then early rock and roll, all the rockabilly guys, the black groups that made these great records, the Marcells and the Five Satins and the Moonglows and all that. I know all that stuff. I know all that stuff from the 50s, and folk music, which is another thing. And so those are the three areas that I know. I don't know anything about today's music. I hear it, but I don't really know anything about it. I know a lot of the groups that came after the 70s and maybe into the 80s, but it seems like once Madonna hit, that video killed the radio star is a very true statement, because, the imagination was taken out of music. Suddenly, you were watching MTV videos and you weren't imagining what the artist was like or the song meant or anything like that, So I think that really kind of dumbed down imagination. It's pretty much gone now. I mean, I don't hear anything anywhere that requires my imagination. And yet all the old songs were full of images and simple images that told a story. A story was important. And even the pop music, I mean, the songs like The Way You Look Tonight, the things that were written for Fred Astaire, those are almost like French movies. They're so beautiful. The economy of words and the way they express things is something I've always been shooting for. That's why that When July Comes came to my mind, or And I Love You So, or Empty Chairs, songs like that I've written. Economy of word usage and saying what you really mean is it's fun, to look at. If you're trying to write a song and you say, geez, there's a lot of garbage words in here that I don't really need, and once you take the garbage out and put meaningful stuff in, you suddenly say, you got a new song.
Right.
That's leading you in a new direction.
Right.
Because you were only thinking of one point to make. And when you take the stupid words out that you don't need, and you put some other ones in that say more, then it makes it clearer, and that will change the next line and the line after that.
And it cuts right to the heart of it, Hate to break. We'll break right here, and we'll be right back on Everything Old is New Again with Don McLean, American Pie.
And I love you so. People ask me how.
This is Everything Old is New Again, America's entertainment pop culture talk show with Douglas Viviani and David Cohen.
Perhaps they'll listen now, for they could not love you, but still your love was true. And when no hope was left inside on that starry, starry night, you took your life as lovers often do. But I could have told you, Vincent, this world was never meant for one as beautiful as you.
What a memorable song, memorable line. Don McLean's with us. David Cohen, Douglas Viviani of Everything Old is New Again. That's a song, as we know, about Vincent van Gogh, describing his famous painting, The Starry Night, which, by the way, I don't think Van Gogh even sold anything before he died. So just to add more pathos to that. And, it's a song of pain, but also an admiration or a song about admiring him as an artist, and maybe sort of as him becoming part of the art itself now in the art of storytelling by Don McLean. And Don, I wonder, that song is so touching and so memorable, and so many people have been affected by it, and sort of come around to the idea of, and mental illness is too strong a word, but of difficulties in life. And I think you expressed it so well in that song. I'm sure you've had so much feedback on that. You're sort of ahead of your time on that, right?
Yes, and there's an interesting thing that Jack Nicholson said in an interview. He said, and he's kind of retired, although I'm sure he'll pop up somewhere and do a very powerful performance, but he said, I don't think that the American public wants to be moved anymore. They don't want to they don't want to have their feelings touched. I was brought up with a Scottish father and an Italian mother, and lots of guilt. And guilt has a place. When you've done wrong, you shouldn't do that anymore. Too much, of course, is not good. But so it sets you up to have a certain kind of emotional reaction to rejection and to loss. So a lot of pain, which I actually don't mind. I mean, whatever happens, I just take it as I want to live life, a real life, and be a real person.
Right.
And so, I don't know quite what I'm trying to say here, but I think that there's been a sea change in terms of conscience in America, and people's conscience, and right and wrong, and like that. Yeah, but people, but by the same token, young people are searching for new things and discover. They're always listening to songs of songwriters like myself. And one of the interesting things I think about, and a lot of very good artists and very important records are going to be turning 50 this year. Not just American Pie. I just saw recently that the Tapestry album, Carole King, have its 50th anniversary this year. So many others. We made a lot of good music in that year. And, I think that one of the interesting things is that once we got away from the studio system, and there was a studio system that made movies, we know about that, MGM, Paramount, and so on, had their actors, their script writers, their people. But in the world of music, it was the same thing. Capitol Records had their studios and their producers and their songwriters and their acts, and they had their arrangers, and you went in, and they all used the same ones, Billy May, and Neil Hefti and Gordon Jenkins, and these terrific talents. But it was a system that created very wonderful records. Comes along the 60s, everything breaks up. Suddenly we're making films ourselves. They're getting film deals, they're not working with the studio. They're giving them money, and they go away and make a movie. The same thing with records. We're making our own records. So you get brand new music. There'll never be another song like A Day in the Life or Good Vibrations or American Pie or even a MacArthur Park. That'll never happen again. Before disco came in, which it did in like the mid-70s.
Right. Which we still have, though. Thank goodness the vinyl and so forth to go back, and all the recordings to go back. David Cohen.
Yeah, this is just purely a fan question, Don. So there's no context here behind this, but you've done many great cover songs, and I've always wondered what were the top 2 or 3 of your favorites all time, if you've ever thought about it that way.
Well, I love the ones I did with Larry Butler because they were really big, beautiful records. And I did 2 albums with Larry Butler in Nashville, Chain Lightning and Believers. And Since I Don't Have You is my number 1. Crying is my number 2. Love Letters, Straight From Your Heart. And Your Cheatin' Heart, I think. Those 4 were lush and beautiful, and I was... recorded better than ever before, and I was ready too. I was the first time in the beginning I was a nervous wreck, and now it was years later, and I was relaxing and inspired by what was going on. But I can never, really relax enough to really get. Now I think I do very much so. I sort of swing with things, but. In those days, I had a million thoughts in my head. I was probably writing 2 songs while I was singing, the other one. And then I got to argue with people. We'll say, well, why do you want to sing that? I said, because I want to. You have to explain yourself, which I hate doing. And they're trying to help you, be commercial, but they don't understand I don't want to be commercial. I want to be good, really, really, really good, and the commercial parts will happen. And that's exactly what did happen.
And were the nerves mostly from, worry about not living up to expectations or,
just being around a whole lot of people who you don't know. And I don't know, it's very complicated. Yeah. I mean, you don't walk in there like you're Bing Crosby. And you're some kind of a massive star. You walk in there like you're a kid who's making his first record. And everybody, sees you as, well, there'll be 100 more like this guy, and just get it over with. Let's do it, whatever. You got to go through all that. And if a guy has that attitude, he's got to take a walk because I don't want him. And they had guys like this, really great players who would come in and just whip, oh, yeah, that's easy. That's easy, but we don't want you. Because you're not playing it the way I want you to play. You're not hearing it,
Right.
So it's a very tricky thing. It really is. And this is why Columbia Records was such a brilliant place, because you had a guy like John Hammond who had been doing things for decades with all sorts of the best artists, and then went around and discovered Bruce Springsteen, discovered Bob Dylan, discovered these people, and they were brought back Pete Seeger, who was blacklisted, and allowed him to be on Columbia Records when almost no other record label would have him. He was suddenly on one of the greatest record labels because they believed in his ideals. So, and then they would know how to market you and treat you and how the record covers should be. And it's just a beautiful thing. These record labels were really as artistic as the artists that they had. They had great art departments and PR people, and it was a classy thing. You look at the Beach Boys on Capitol Records, the records they actually released. The covers are great, and it's just perfect. The records are fantastic. But they made those records themselves, and so if you go to the store and you buy an old Beach Boys album, that's going to be way better than a new Beach Boys CD of the same album that's been remastered and screwed around with, because that's exactly like Brian Wilson wanted you to hear it. And at the time, later on, other people will mess with it.
How about that?
And if that's the way Brian Wilson wanted you to hear it, that's the way you should listen to it, right?
Well, that's the point. That was the offering. Here it is. And if you can find a brand new, old, Beach Boys Today or Fun or whatever, and you like vinyl, that's what you want to get, not the new vinyl they're going to put out, and not CDs. And if you feel like it, you compare the CD with the old vinyl, and you'll hear a vast difference.
And we're hearing a vast difference to usual radio here with Don McLean, celebrating the 50th anniversary of American Pie. Don, thank you so much for being with us. We're looking forward to possibly the world tour in 2021, depending upon, I guess, what's happening out there. And we just want to thank you so much for spending some time with us.
I think we're going to get out of this pretty soon now. It feels good to me. And I'll tell you, I've enjoyed this year being home. Because I've been on the road for 50 years. I'm going to have to work hard at getting myself up off the couch. But I'm going to do it, and I'm going to travel the world and do at least one more really big world tour. And but it's been great meeting people like you and doing these kind of things, which I normally wouldn't do, and getting my YouTube channel up. And we've got a documentary coming and a children's book and a Broadway show, and I've signed for all these with people that know how to do them. So we've been doing a lot of business in this year, and let's hope that everything resolves itself in the next 5 or 6 months, and we're back more or less to normal.
Go ahead,
Not to put too much pressure on you, Don, but Doug and I will definitely be at one of those shows. So,
no doubt about that. And then we'll ask you back to promote the Broadway show or whatever's the next venture. We've really had a great time. Thank you so much, Don McLean.
Well, thank you for having me.
It's a pleasure. It's a pleasure. We'll be back next week. Everything old's new again.